It is 3 o'clock here in Crescent City, and this is Conversations with Sam on Sundays. And today we have a little bit of a treat for our local audience. I'd like to first thank our advertiser, Mary Wilson, and Ocean World. They're located at Highway 304, Highway 101 South. You can reach them at 707-464-4900. I'd like to thank Mary for funding this program, and am hoping that locals and visitors alike will patronize her business. Today, ordinarily we talk about local things on this program, and they're generally things that interest me, but today we have a couple of special guests to add some life to this program, I hope. We have Roger Gitlin, our First District Supervisor, and candidate Bob Berkowitz, who is running for the District 5 seat down in the southeast part of Crescent City and Klamath. And today we're going to spend some time talking about some issues that are important here in the community that for a long time have been issues and have had a rocky road towards any sort of resolution. The main ones, of course, are Sutter Health and their management of the local hospital, last chance grade. Also, in that Crescent City has a very feeble economy at this point. We'd like to make this town a tourist attraction for the country as well as California, and that requires a little bit of sprucing up on our part. So we want to talk a little bit about blight in the county and the city and efforts that are being made to try to clean that up. Being that Bob is from Klamath, of course, the last chance grade issue is very, very important to him because it provides that community with access to Crescent City. And it is an arterial way into the county for a great many of our goods and services. We also would like to talk about the Klamath River, the dam closures or the dam removals, and the possibility of restoring the salmon runs to that community. And finally, we'd like to talk a little bit about the idea that politics here should be a local concept and not be influenced by sums of money that don't originate here, that actually come from out of the area. There's been some discussion about that recently in the newspaper, and as well as in the Crescent City Times about this kind of behavior out of some of the candidates. So I'd like to turn it over to basically the two gentlemen that are here in front of me to talk about first Sutter Coast. I'd like to point the first question to Roger, and is there any movement on the Board of Supervisors to attempt to rectify the situation that Sutter Health has created for the local hospital?
Well, first of all, Sam, thanks for having me here. It's an honor to be on your show. It's an honor to talk to the folks and tell them from our perspective what's going on. Now let's talk about Sutter Coast. First, it's Sutter Health, and then there's the local entity, one of 24 hospitals which Sutter Health controls, and that is Sutter Coast. The latest discussion has been, is Sutter Coast paying its fair share of property taxes? Now, the assessed value of Sutter Coast Hospital, again owned by Sutter Health, who derives the benefit, which is deemed a not-for-profit hospital, according to Welfare Institutions Code, it's a $43 million assessment. So if you take 1% at $430,000, that would be the installment if it were not a not-for-profit hospital, and it would be divided into two installments like we all do and pay. and then Del Norte County would realize 19 cents on the dollar. So the actual dollars realized into the Del Norte County General Fund would be about $79,000, $80,000 a year. But we don't have that luxury. Now, so it does not appear that I'm picking or identifying on Sutter Health. This is the same entity in 2014 that removed $10.8 million of its profits to go down to Sacramento. And because it's a closely held corporation, we can't find out where that money went. We don't know where the money went. It could have gone to top executive salaries, which the top executive makes $6 million a year of the 24-unit chain hospital. We don't know that because Sutter Health does not open its books. Now, the rub here, Sam, is that you can't be a not-for-profit and at the same time close your books to the public. They must open up their books and they must be transparent. And up to now, they've not. The Board of Supervisors has asked twice to review its records and has been not answered. So we don't have that luxury where we can say, are you in violation of the Welfare and Institutions Code? Are you actually a for-profit hospital? Is some of it or part of it or none of it? We don't know the answers, so all we can do is bring it up on our Board of Supervisors, and I think the discussion at the last meeting was this is a State Board of Equalization matter. We will contact the appropriate people in Sacramento and the State Board of Equalization to determine if Sutter Health is in fact following the terms and conditions of its not-for-profit status. That's it in a nutshell. There's a great deal at stake here because essentially Del Norte County has no money. We just balanced our budget, which is about just a little under $25 million in the general fund, and it's $124 million, which are basically pass-through monies from the state and the federal government. But we don't have the ability to go out and do the kinds of things that we would like to do to enhance our community, putting lights on our streets in the county, doing the kind of things that counties can do. We don't have that money. We don't have the ability to give raises to perhaps those overly worked and certainly underpaid Department of Health and Human Services social workers who are being paid an abysmal salary.
Can I jump in here
Sure.
for a second? Getting back to Sutter Health.
Sure.
This has been an issue for, as long as I can remember. I've
Yes.
lived here in this county for 40 years, and it precedes your election to office initially.
It does.
And why is it now we're starting to address this issue where it seems like it's been a problem for the best part of 20 or 25 years?
Well, let me address that question specifically. Everything in life has timing. The timing is right on this issue because we are losing doctors, we are lacking in services, and it's becoming more pronounced. I'll give you a good example. For many, many years, we had a urologist in our community, Dr. Davis. Sutter decided, I'm not quite sure why, to bring in another urologist. Now, Dr. Davis was an individual doctor who supported the status of acute care hospital, not critical access, and he supported local administration, not send it down to Sacramento. Now, what Sutter Health did, is brought in a urologist to compete with Dr. Davis, and Dr. Davis closed his shop, moved to Iowa, and reopened there in his medical practice. Now, the urologist that came up from Sutter has now moved on. We now have no urologist in Del Norte County. Now, when you stop and you take a look, was that the only situation? No. They're constant reminders from doctors, professional people, that we're losing doctors. They're moving out. They're brought into this community on one for under the guise of, we want you here. Again, a doctor is $300,000 is not a lot of money to pay for a doctor with all their education, what have you. So one particular doctor, Dr. Ritter, was brought here, a surgeon, second surgeon here, and he lasted a little over a year. Excellent surgeon, but when he went to renew, his renewal was $160,000. So they cut his salary down, and he moved up to Astoria. Now we've lost that doctor. Now this is a practice. This has been going on for a long time, that Sutter is bringing people in, and as soon as they come in, they leave. Now, the folks are the ones who suffer. We are increasing the number of, and interrupt me anytime because I tend to talk a little bit, as you know. We're increasing the number of Calor life flights. I think we're exceeding 800 a year. For the average person in Del Norte County to derive simple medical services, they're not going to get it at Del Norte County. If you have a heart, we don't have a cardiologist. We don't even have kidney dialysis chairs. I know that they're coming, and we keep hearing that, but as of this date, September 24th, 2016, we don't have a kidney dialysis chair in Crescent City. The closest one is in McKinleyville.
I'm getting the fact that nothing's happening, basically.
Well, the point I'm making
or it's
is
very slow progress.
The doctors have brought this to the board's attention. Dr. Duncan is a good example, Dr. Caldwell, and to the healthcare board. Now, from there, it is now reaching us, and it is up to the Board of Supervisors to decide how it wants to settle a problem. And we do have, for lack of a better word of description, we do have mixed feelings on how we want to address that problem.
How is that going to affect the people in District 5? The fact that, are you aware of any issues in District 5 with respect to the abysmal service that you get at Sutter Health and from Sutter Health's management of the local hospital? Or are you getting any complaints, or are you hearing any?
Well, you know, this whole thing, all right, basically affects all of Del Norte County, not just Klamath or not just other areas, but basically the entire area. This whole downsizing of Sutter, in my mind, is basically by design. They feel that if they can get rid of a lot of the services they have, they can make more money. Regardless of what they're supposed to be as a non-for-profit hospital, they're definitely making big dollars. But we're not seeing those dollars here. What we're seeing is the promise. We promise a dialysis organization here. That's what they promise, but you don't see it here, and it's not going to be here. You know, Mr. Gitlin was exactly right. With the doctors that they bring in, they try to put our other existing doctors out of business, and they're very successful at that. And then they force the doctors that they've brought in to quit or go somewhere else. That means they don't have the service that they promised. Of course, they're going to say, well, we're always looking for new doctors to come in here. That's really a farce. They're really not doing that. Sutter Coast Hospital has become basically a triage unit. It's a MASH unit. And what they're doing is they're bringing people in, they're stabilizing them, and then shipping them out. The big problem here, of course, is when they ship these patients out to, let's say, Reading or some other facility, what does that do to their caregivers, the parents, the wives, the husbands? When they have to go 5, 6, 7, 8 hours a day, or 8 hours just in transport to where they are, and then transport that patient back because there's no way to get this patient back from the hospital in Reading. Nobody's going to pay for that. This is a great burden on the family. And this is a big difference from what you remember, Sam, Seaside Hospital, which was a full-service hospital. And Sutter Coast started out that way, to be a full-service hospital.
But it didn't last that long.
No.
That's the issue that
No.
I have.
No, it didn't last that long, and it's been deteriorating ever since. Their service, has been deteriorating ever since.
May I interject a thought?
Sure.
It isn't, the message is not Supervisor Gitlin or Bob Berkowitz. This is not the message. We're the carriers of the message. There's something systemically wrong when Sutter Health introduces a program to say, yes, we want to give people good health care. We're going to put them on a Cal or Life Flight plane to go to Medford for, let's say, open heart surgery or something of that sort, or complications. There's nothing the matter with that, except it's a great cost to the county, a great cost to the delivery of that. It's about $50,000 to $60,000 a flight. It's only one way.
In certain circumstances, though, it can become a very dangerous proposition.
We know that.
And I've already had a gentleman on this station talking about his experiences where he nearly lost his wife over the fact that Sutter Coast sent his wife after a lengthy deliberation in the local hospital to Medford, where the resolution of the situation was fairly minor, but
And there's one more thing here. Don't forget that if you have a heart attack, and of course you can't say where you want to go, right? Let's assume they send you to Medford, but you're not 65. You're covered by Obamacare. Oh, by the way, that hospital in Medford is not a network provider. So consequently, it's going to cost you an absolute fortune out of your pocket because you're not covered by insurance, even though you had no choice where to go. That's a huge, huge problem with Obamacare.
And it has to be remembered, Sam, that we are the largest minority in Delaware County are seniors.
So how is it in a leadership role that you two will hopefully find yourself in? Are you going to move this issue forward and reach some sort of a resolution, Bob?
Right. Actually, what we can do as a group, especially in small counties and border counties, we can get together through the rural counties organizations, which we are a part of, by the way, and press for legislation that will modify Obamacare that says, hey, if you're within 100 miles of the border, all right, it doesn't matter where you go because you have no say in that, all right, and therefore that ought to be considered a network hospital no matter where you go. Because remember, the promise of Obamacare was with your insurance under Obamacare, you won't go broke.
So it'll become a federal issue then.
Absolutely. But we can influence that.
If I can bring this thought in here, it is so important. Now we're in a pivotal election period. This subject we're talking about is actually a healthcare district issue. It's not per se an issue that the Board of Supervisors takes up.
Correct.
This is an issue that, and there's subject to an election, absolutely. There are a number of people, I think there's going to be 3 openings. This is a pivotal year there's lots of openings on different boards and city council and of course healthcare district. That's why it's so important that the right people are in this position. I don't want to speak for the healthcare district, but they're very frustrated with their relationship with Sutter Coast. They don't think they're being treated fairly and with dignity and respect. They hear lots of conflicting, we're going to do this, and then they end up not doing it. So we need a healthcare partner in this community who's going to act in good faith. And part of this, and I'm going to speak what I will support, and I believe the community absolutely needs, we need a 49-bed acute care hospital. We don't need to play this game where we're not going to seek a critical access hospital, which will lower our amount of services and also reduce beds down to 25. That's currently off the table, but it's an eyelash away from being brought up again by the Sutter Health people. They've never really abandoned it. They're just not talking about it now.
And the reason they're not talking about it is because they've kept that census lower than 25. Now they've got a good argument say, hey, we haven't had 25 people in our hospital, 25 beds, occupied for years. So we have a good argument for reduced service.
And my position as an elected supervisor is to make sure that quality of life issues, and having a quality hospital is a quality of life issue. Make no mistake about that. That this is front and center, that we must have a state-of-the-art hospital to serve our community. We're an isolated community, and if we don't speak up as elected officials, then we're not doing our job. If we look the other way and say, well, it's not our problem, we'll have to just deal with it, it's the best we can get, and Roger, you're going to force Sutter Health to leave our community. No, that's not going to happen. They have a virtual cash cow here. Any entity that takes $10.8 million out in 2014 to go down to Sacramento, they're not giving that up.
So there's no possibility of another company coming in to manage the hospital?
No, I'm not going to say that. As a matter of fact, that's an option, which I hope we don't have to look at that option, because we want a healthcare partner that's going to act in good faith. But this is a great market for someone who will serve our medical needs through an acute care 49-bed hospital that provide with local administration that actually wants to deliver services to our population, of which 23 to 25% are seniors, and they're going to need a good hospital here. We don't need to put them on a one-way CalOr flight to Medford or Sacramento. That's ridiculous.
No, actually, that's true. All right. What happens here is we need those profits to stay here in Del Norte County. $10 million going out of the county is outrageous when we could be supplying dialysis services right here and other kinds of things that we need. Why should those profits, and they are profits, be sent somewhere else? That's the advantage of having local control on a local hospital.
Profits in a nonprofit.
That's
I'd
exactly right.
I'd like to move off the healthcare subject and move to another issue, which is troubling to me because being somewhat aware of what has gone on for a number of years in this community, I'm aware of the fact that alternate routes around Last Chance Grade were on the horizon at Caltrans as much as 45 or 50 years ago. And here we are in 2016, and we have a stakeholders group that is talking about choosing a route to bypass Last Chance Grade, and I'm wondering what in the dickens is that all about? Is there any movement towards resolving that problem? And I'd like to start out with Bob, because his community is going to be considerably affected.
All of Del Norte will be considerably affected by whatever. But Caltrans has stated it's not if Last Chance Grade goes down, it's when it goes down. They know it's going to go. So what do we have? The Congressman Huffman established a stakeholders group. The stakeholders group made up of so many different interests. Everything from 3 environmental organizations that don't want anything done at all to others who really, let's take, for example, Kurt Stremberg's parents were killed on that road 40 years ago. That makeup of that group guaranteed one thing: it couldn't do anything at all. It was designed not to do anything, and that's exactly what happened. 2 years ago, that's basically how long it's been, they were given one task: give us a route. Did they do that?
No.
Of course not. Why? Because they couldn't even get their group to have a consensus on the route. What did that do? That delayed everything that's gone on. Think of it. Caltrans has estimated that at the rate they're going, it may get done in 23 years from now. Now think about that.
Not a chance.
Nobody could plan. I can't plan 24 months from now, let alone 23 years from now, and nobody can do that kind of thing. And so what we're talking about here is no plan at all. Now, my opposition is fine with 23 years. He has no idea of any other plan. Mr. Gitlin and myself basically have put forth a plan that says we want this thing done in under 5 years. And hey, I'm not stuck on 5 years. If it takes 6 or maybe 7, I'm okay with that. But if you don't plan, if you don't have a goal in mind, you don't have anywhere to go. And so what I'm looking for, if I'm on the board, you know, Sam, that I've had legislative experience. Being a field representative to a congressman, I know how legislation works. I'm hoping this board will send me back to Washington, create a bill, have a sponsor get that bill, and then get it passed by both houses of Congress and get it signed by the president. Let's get this thing off dead center. That's my plan.
Roger.
Yeah, I'm going to chomp into the bit. I want to say a few things. I'm not here as long as you guys have been here. You know, my wife and I moved up here 7 years ago to retire and live on the ocean. And I one day opened my big mouth and I found myself running for supervisor. Then I won. But one of the things that came about in March of 2013 is I attended the economic summit at the Elk Valley Rancheria. And there, and I don't want to demonize anybody any further, a certain high-ranking individual in our Transportation Commission, when asked about last chance grade, and I'll be very frank with you, I did not know the extent of Kurt Stremberg and last chance grade much as what I'm hearing here, and of course all the people in the audience. And the statement that was made is there will never, never, never be a road built around last chance grade. I was sitting with a person who owned a business, a very prominent business down in Klamath, about the second never. His eyes met mine, and I kind of raised our eyebrows, and what is this never, never, never? And then I did my homework on this. And I met up with Kurt Stremberg, and I learned that his family had plunged to their deaths in 1972 after dropping him off to go on a trip to Finland after he had graduated Cal State Hayward. And then I'd met up with Chuck Blackburn, and the three of us formed an advisory committee. And with that, we generated, and I'm guessing it's between 36 and 40 letters of support from not only Del Norte County, but the city of Crescent City, Humboldt County, Mendocino County, Rumiano Cheese, the Pelican Bay State Prison, you name it. They came out and signed letters of support to build a bypass. All this went to Caltrans District 1. We forced them to look at this issue now. Now, as a result of that, all of a sudden it came on the radar screen, and then Congressman Huffman became involved with it. And I have nothing but the highest level of respect for Congressman Huffman. But his constituency lies in Marin and Sonoma counties. 3% of his voters come from Del Norte County. So his motivation may not be as strong to, let's say, we have a catastrophic situation on the horizon if it were happening in, let's say, Sausalito, where so many of his constituents live in Marin County and Sonoma County. So he formed his stakeholders group. I asked to be on it. I was declined. Now, the folks that are on there either don't have a grip of reality of what is happening there, that there is movement. And 2015, the mountain bulged 17 inches out and dropped 13 inches down. And again, the last 6-8 months, we've not had any rain. There has been very little movement, but as of last week, and you're getting fresh news, Caltrans has announced that they now are starting to see movement. There was a large sonar sound as if there was a movement there, and they're in the process of measuring it. The road and the mountain are going to be coming down. It's not if, it's a when, and nobody can predict that. To sit here and say we will have this road built between the years 2031 to 2039 is ludicrous. It's like, why are we doing this? This is an exigent matter. And as we speak, there are things that are going on in federal highways, and we have brought this to the attention of our federal partners. The money has to come from the federal government, and I believe it will, and we are making movement, and I want to congratulate those people who are in Denver looking at this situation pragmatically, because the road is going to come down. And what will that do to Del Norte County? We have a $300 million a year economy here. 101 is a major route. You breach that, how do you get into 199 only? That's a compromised road too. So our economy is very much at risk. Not to mention the prices of real estate will plummet. The prices of ordinary food and other goods will soar, and this will begin a death knell for our community if we allow this to happen and we are not proactive. So I have called on a 5-year plan. And with that, I've shared this with Bob Berkowitz also. Bob, you know it. Do you know how long it took to build the Golden Gate Bridge? I'll tell everybody here. 1933 January, and it was completed with the first vehicles crossing over in May of 1937. 4 years and 5 months. Now, no CEQA, no NEPA, none of these obstructionist kinds of things that are going to prevent a simple bypass from being built. We built the Golden Gate Bridge in 4.5 years, less than 4.5 years. So please tell me that don't tell me we can't build this bypass in a reasonable amount of time, but we must act now. And I hope that my colleagues will see that our very future is at stake, and if we sit there and do nothing but put Band-Aids on this road, then shame on us.
We're going to take a quick station break. This is KFUG 101.1 FM on your radio dial. KFUG is also streaming live on your computer if you so desire, kfug.org. And we have with us in the studio this afternoon Bob Berkowitz, who is running for Supervisor for District 5, and Roger Gitlin, who is our current Supervisor for District 1. We have been talking about two major issues in the county, Sutter Health and Last Chance Grade. And at this time, we are going to move on to other more exciting topics. Recently here in Crescent City, there's been a big flap over some of the commercial buildings here in town being somewhat less reputable. And as we are making an attempt to move from a resource-based economy, which has largely escaped us, we are now attempting to clean up our town and make it a mecca for tourism from around the nation if possible, from abroad if possible. And in order to accomplish that task, we're going to need to put on our best costume and clean up our mess. So with that being said, I'd like to first allow Bob a few words because I know Roger has many to say. So Bob, take it away.
You know, the thing that should grab you is take a look at the efforts 4 years ago to clean up this community to the efforts that are going on now. 4 years ago, there was no talk about take a bite out of blight. There was no talk about cleaning up certain areas, beachfront, all kinds of areas around the city, around the county. Don't forget, there have been trash all over the place, trash on roadways, right-of-ways, all of this. Nobody was doing a thing. And then came along Roger Gitlin. And Roger Gitlin basically looked at the community and said, I don't like what I see. Well, the Board of Supervisors didn't do anything. I mean, they haven't had a budget basically for community cleanup of any consequence. So Roger formed this Take a Bite Out of Blight and got volunteers together. Volunteers, people interested in cleaning up this community. And we got people, all kinds of people volunteering. There's only one group that's never had a single volunteer. Can you guess what that group is? It's the Board of Supervisors. They talk a great game, but have they ever been there on a Saturday morning at 9:30 when we're all cleaning up the beachfront, or we're cleaning up along Front Street or any of those areas? No. Why is that? Why can't we get people involved, especially those people in positions of power, to be able to be a part of this. And now we're seeing even city council candidates are getting involved in this. They're getting involved in their community. But there's a reason why they're getting involved. Is now because they're being shamed into it. Because of the bite out of blight mantra that is going on. And we see it. The newspaper's gotten so tired of seeing Roger's name in there with bite out of blight that they won't even print anything anymore. So let me give it a clue here that at 9:30 in the morning on Saturday, there will be a cleanup going on. It's been going on every Saturday. All right, Roger's there sometimes. I'm there. I've even seen city council candidate Alex Fallman there. And all kinds of people who just are interested in cleaning up their community, meeting at the lighthouse parking lot. That's community involvement. It's not government doing anything. It's individuals in the community saying, we don't like the looks of this community and we want to do something about it. I got a sneaking hunch Roger may want to say something about this, so I'm going to turn it over to Roger.
No, never. Not a chance. He couldn't possibly have anything to say.
No comment. No, actually, thank you, Bob. You know, when you're passionate about something, you tend to act out on it. We moved up here, and remember, I live here. This is my community. And I live in a magnificent area. I'm face the magnificent Pacific Ocean. When I look one way, I have one look. When I look the other way, it's depressing. But I want to say this because a beautiful community is a magnet for visitors and a source of pride for residents. And for apparently an all too long period of time, we have dropped our vigilance in keeping our community pristine. So we started this program called Take a Bite Out of Blight. I don't want anyone to think I invented the term. I actually saw it from a city in Connecticut called Southington, Connecticut, where they had a program called Take a Bite Out of Blight. It had to do with goats eating up all the weeds in these open fields. I didn't know there was too much rural property left in Connecticut, apparently, around this particular. So they had to take a bite out of blight. It wasn't copyrighted. So we adopted it here. And to date, we've done in excess of 20 cleanups, which involve anywhere from small groups of people up to 25 and 50 people. It's a pleasure. It's an honor to see people coming into the picture and saying, let's go clean up this alcohol bottles and cigarette butts and fast food wrappers and fecal matter and bottles of urine and all this other stuff on South Beach on Department of Fish and Wildlife property. They provided us with a dumpster. We gave them 50 volunteers, and now the problem is gone. But what's the definition of insanity? You do the same thing over again and expect a different result. There is no shortage of human-created blight because people are allowed to live in a certain way, and we don't do anything. We have had cleanups in every single of the 5 districts, 1 through 5. I play no favorites. If there's an area and there's either private or public property, we go to work, we organize these folks, and it's a labor of love. Now, I used to say, gee, this is a non-issue. I mean, this isn't a Republican, this isn't a Democrat issue. This is just a community issue. Oh no, quite the contraire. You know, people have some kind of idea that I'm doing this for personal gain. I'm not doing this for personal gain. I want to live in a beautiful community. And when people say, you want to make us like Carmel, you want to make us like Newport Beach, and I initially say, well, no, I don't. But by the way, what's the matter with that? You go down to Carmel, not a blade of grass is out of a place. You go to these charming communities, they're magnets for visitors. We're not going to be that, but we have arguably some of the most magnificent geography in North America between the ocean and the forest. Let's clean it up. Let's clean up our neighborhoods so that when you drive up and down some of these streets, people aren't saying, let me get out of this town. I don't like to see this poverty here. I don't want to see someone making a mess, or I'm going to bring it up again, walking into the side of where Safeway is and urinating and publicly acting in an unsavory manner. But if we don't address it, it gets worse. Now, my point is this, and I'm not shy about saying this thing. Other communities around us, Crescent City, have checked this. As you know, Bayshore Mall down in Eureka, the police chief, they've cleaned up that area in back of the mall. And in Medford and in Grants Pass, they have local ordinance which says you may not hand an object such as money through your operating car window to someone who says, I need money or something. You can't do that. We don't adopt those here. So now where do the people come from? Oregon, Curry County, the same ordinance exists. Brookings, Curry County, they're coming to Crescent City. That's why we've had a spike in the number of people that are with nowhere to go, and they're looking to sustain themselves. But when you give them money, it's not necessarily going to go for what you think it's going to go for, food or gasoline. It's going to possibly go for alcohol or drugs or fast food things that end up having us clean up. I know, we see it. So those people who are coming here to ply their trade in panhandling, I would like to get to the point where the community becomes equally as outraged as what's going on in Eureka and what's going on and did go on in Medford. They don't seem to have the same problems in Grants Pass and in Brookings Harbor, where they seem to have a control over it now. I'd like to see this community adopt a way, just say, let's give these people legitimate help. You can't live in the bushes, you can't make a mess, you can't publicly act antisocially, you can't aggressively panhandle. Here's what we're going to do. These are people without free will. They're drug addicted, they're alcohol addicted, they're mentally ill in many cases. There are legitimate people who've fallen through the cracks, and there are criminals. There's 5 groups there of people who make up the so-called people who need help. It is the sign of an uncompassionate society which doesn't really help these people. And they talk about it by throwing a dollar bill at them as if it's going to help them. No, we need to give these people real help, and it must be mandated.
So where's this help going to come from?
Okay, so we're kind of bridged into a new subject. Bob, jump in here anytime. I'm sure the public is hearing my voice lots. So where it's going to come from, I'll be happy to go in, Bob, unless you want to take the mic down.
Well, the way the Board of Supervisors is constituted right now, you've got a basically 1-4 vote on almost anything that happens, and you know who the one is. If somebody was introduced, if Mr. Gitlin introduced a resolution on the Board of Supervisors that said, let's resolve that the sky is blue, he would lose that vote on a 1-4. Why is that? It's because basically those other people have their own agenda, and they don't like change. They don't want anything that's going to force them to change.
They're objecting to cleaning up the environment. That seems...
They wouldn't even bring that up. If you said, it's a good idea, let's do this. Let's create a budget for the Bite Out of Blight group so that they can clean this up. A budget for dumpsters, for example, to take that to the Recology or the center, okay?
I mean,
he wouldn't be able to get that.
The bottom line is we're talking about cleaning up the county.
The bottom line is that we have a dysfunctional Board of Supervisors. I'd
like to chime in, and Bob has a fairly accurate, but not totally. I don't want to demonize the other 4 members of the board. I live in hope, but I will tell you that we have been the driving force to implement systemic change in cleaning up our county. The county doesn't have the dispensable funds. We have 1 code enforcement officer. I want to get a second half officer in there, and we can't do it. We don't have the money. But let me make my point on this, Samuel. So as you're understanding, who would object to cleaning up the county? No one reasonable, except there are some, and one of those board members is Elaine Duck, and she'll be out, who will put the emphasis on what is this blight program doing with the personal belongings of those who are so less fortunate as to be living in the bushes. Let me assure you, we're not taking their materials and disposing them, but they're living and they're trespassing. But we have certain members of the board who, and one is leaving, and she is no longer going to be on that board of supervisors, to be replaced by someone who has a different point of view on this. And part of what we're doing here, Sam, is we are implementing systemic change, and there will be more change in the next election. I'm hopeful and grateful if my constituents in District 1 wish to send me back. I'm willing to work as hard as I can for as long as I can for 4 more years to try to implement some of the changes that we as a community apparently want. If I end up stepping on some toes, I guess so be it. We'll have to do that. We'll have to take that risk. But Bob's election is critical to this, because once we have the number of board members who see the forest through the trees, perhaps the other 2 board members who will see the light a little bit differently.
But the argument that a reasonable person wouldn't object to cleaning up the argument. There are people in this community. I mean, I see letters in the editor. I see the triplicate writing about their objection to this basic concept, and they make all sorts of excuses around that basic concept, but really what they're doing is lobbying against cleaning up this town, and I find that mind-boggling.
I concur with your observation. My position on the triplicate will be followed by the word no comment.
Okay.
So let me add
enough.
one more thing here. The argument is always made, no matter what board you're on, whether it's a harbor board or a school board or board of supervisors, city council, when you want to do something different, the argument is always made, we don't have the money. Whatever it is, it's we don't have the money. And that usually ends discussion right there. But actually, you do have the money. It's just allocated where it's always been allocated. And you never look at those allocations. Never look at for example, let me give you one example. The Board of Supervisors, this current Board of Supervisors, gave their marching orders to the CAO, the County Administrative Officer. They said, we want to have a reserve, prudent, right? We want to have a reserve, and we want to have a resource officer. And that's your instruction. That's what we want you to give us. When the budget came back, the CAO said, sorry, can't give you a reserve and can't give you a resource officer. Now think about that. Who's running this county? Is it the Board of Supervisors or is it the County Administrative Officer? Because it seems to me that anytime the CAO can dictate to the Board of Supervisors, you know who's running the Board of Supervisors, and it certainly isn't the board. I can't believe that the board has been put in this position, that their employee who is responsible to them has reversed the position and told the Board of Supervisors what he is and is not going to do. I don't know if you want to chime in on that.
I do, Bob. I do, Bob, and we need to be fair about this. The CAO answers to the Board of Supervisors, which I'm holding up the fingers 4-1 again. So he knows who he's preaching to. With all due respect to the CAO and his dictating he said you can do these things, but you're going to have to cut back services in this area, and you're going to have to perhaps reconsider furlough, and you're going to have to do some other things that you may not want to do. And we are in the middle right now of the public period where we will continue to be talking about this budget, whether we adopt it or not. So those choices still remain open. I'm of the opinion I'm not willing to cut back services because that's what the county does. Because of this original statement, we need to provide a resource officer, which I appreciate the value of it is, but it's all prioritized. So the CAO, who I hope one day you'll be talking to on a professional basis, he will follow board direction. The board direction on almost all issues is 4-1, and that is an immutable fact. So when that changes, and I suspect it will soon begin to change, and that's why this election is so important, because this is a generational election. We've never had an opportunity where we can turn around Delaware County during your lifetime, Sam, or yours, Bob, where you've been here for decades and decades and decades.
Better hurry up.
Okay,
Yeah,
that we actually now, during this cycle of 2016,
God and I are friends.
have the ability to have a majority on the board.
I want to jump in one more because I want to just take issue a little bit with Roger. The CAO shouldn't have said, well, in order to implement this, you're going to have to come up with an idea of how we can do away with other positions or eliminate this or that. His job was to implement the board's wishes and come up with a plan to be able to implement those directives from the board, not to push it back on the board and saying, well, if you want to do this, you're going to have to do other things, but don't
On that respect,
don't do that.
Mr. Berkowitz is correct.
Yeah, I see where you're where you're coming from, but my experience has been with these executive directors of this department and these executive directors of that department. It seems that once they come before the board and they make their suggestions, I use that term loosely, there very seldom is any kind of probing into those suggestions to see if they are actually functional or whether they work for the county. I see a lot of behavior on various boards around the county where it's almost to the point where you feel like they're writing in their decisions. They're not doing their homework. They're not.
Well, let me respond to that a little bit. I'm no neophyte when it comes to these boards. I served on the school board for 12 years, all right? And for 3 of those years, I was its chairman. And we would say, as a board, here's what we want you to do, our administrator. And our administrator would come back and say, here's how we're going to do it. That's the way it should work. All right, and I'm so amazed at this board of supervisors with no guts to say, well, you didn't come back with a directive of saying how we can do this. Maybe you ought to go back and tell us how you're going to do this rather than saying, oh, we can't do it because, get this, the old argument again, we have no money.
Yeah, I get what you're saying, and I get that the current board behaves sometimes in that fashion, but I've been watching the board for longer than the last 4 years, far longer than the last 4 years, and I've sat and listened at other commissions and board meetings, and I see the same kind of behavior for a lot longer than the last 4 years.
Well, let's change it.
That's what I'm...
There is change. There is dynamic change. In the 4 years that I've been on this board, I will be happy to share with you things that have changed simply by we bringing up something. And you all remember we had a public health officer who lived out of county. You all remember that.
Micheletti.
Martinelli?
Martinelli, sorry.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I want to get the right one so we don't...
Yeah.
So Dr. Martinelli lived in Santa Barbara for up to 2 years, and he was still being compensated as the public health officer. When I got on the board, I questioned this day one. Well, that's not right. Can't we find a local doctor here? We have 17. Why can't we find a local MD to be our public health officer? And then I was told by then chairman of the Board of Supervisors, Mike Sullivan, he agreed with me. But what came out on consent agenda, and I hope our folks understand what consent agenda is. Consent agenda is a rubber stamp. You have to actually pull it off. Otherwise, it's not going to be discussed. It's just a blanket. What came out was he would continue his position, but the county would find an unpaid volunteer to do the work of the public health officer in the event that the public health officer could not be in the county. Well, I pulled it off the consent agenda, and I had a discussion on this. I said, well, why are we not putting, obviously, money under the table? That's what it came out to me. Why aren't we just hiring someone who can be here? I tried to introduce you have to be here at least 6 months out of the year, and that didn't fly. And I realized very quickly that there was a network in place to keep him in his position. So we took the vote on that, and it passed 4-1, meaning we would have a public health officer substitute if he couldn't. Now, within I think it was one meeting or 2 meetings, unbeknownst to me, we made a change at the public health officer position, and Dr. Raywalt was suddenly brought in to be the public health officer, and I had simply 2 questions for him. First of all, are you a medical doctor? And he says, yes. And I said, do you have a California driver's license? Because that's the 2 requirements. And he said, yes. I said, welcome aboard. Now, why does it have to come to that? Now we have a local person who is our public health officer. If we break a pipe or something, the water is contaminated, we don't have to call somebody in Santa Barbara to come up here and look at it and certify it. That's the kind of thing that was going on. Now, many of these people who have taken these positions of opposition are no longer they're not serving in county anymore. And I wish nothing but the best for Mike Sullivan. And our Gretchen Stewart also stepped out. She got a 4-1 renewal on her position as county council. And I would say that it was a public record. And then within a matter of days, she resigned. So there is movement. There is hope there. And I'm not saying I'm right all the time, but it's okay to have an honest, robust discussion and not have to be all agreeing 5-0, 94.6% of the time, which is, I think, the figure came along when I took on the board. I was reminded 94.6% of all votes were unanimous. And I said, I don't think that's something to be proud of.
No. I'm going to take a quick station break, and then I want to move on to a couple of other topics. This is KFUG FM 101.1 on your radio dial. This program has been sponsored by Ocean World. You can reach them at 707-464-4900. Ocean World is open 7 days a week and provides a overflowing gift shop, a gift for that local or that tourist that's visiting our community. You are greeted with the opportunity to take a tour to view the wonders of the local waters, and it is open the year round. With that, I am speaking with Bob Berkowitz and Roger Gitlin here this afternoon. Roger's our District 1 supervisor. Bob is thrown his hat in the ring and is running for the 5th district supervisor. And for that reason, I'd like to change gears and ask him to talk a little bit about both the restoration of the salmon in the Klamath River and the dam removal. And then I want to move on to our final topic, which is out of the area contributions to various political campaigns in the community. So Bob, Klamath River dams and salmon restoration, take it away.
If you, and you've been here for a long time, if you remember down in the Klamath, when the salmon were running, there were more fishermen than you could count on those banks. And the salmon would run so thick that basically you'd snag more than you'd catch, because all you had to do was throw your line in and you would catch a salmon. This area for salmon was known worldwide. People used to spend their vacations up here just doing nothing but fishing the Klamath River for salmon. Contrast that with today. These runs have been decimated. Why have they been decimated? The consensus is that these dams, the 4 dams that they're talking about, have prevented the salmon from getting to their spawning areas. If they can't get to the spawning areas and they can't spawn, you don't have a new generation of salmon. So for every year, the salmon populations have been decimated. Pacific Power realized that, And they said, these dams that we have are no longer efficient for us. So we wouldn't object to having them removed. The Yurok tribe said, yeah, absolutely. All right, those are what's causing the killing of the salmon. We too want them removed. And the state of California went along with that and said, yeah, because it doesn't benefit us either. So some time ago, Pacific Power was able to come up with $250 million of your dollars. If you take a look at your power bill, you will see that for dam removal. All right, there's a certain amount there. And the state came up with matching money for that. The only thing that stood in the way was the federal government. And that was basically they were objecting, and they were objecting because it would affect the water going for farmers. That has been eliminated. That objection has been eliminated. And so now what we're talking about is those dams being removed by the year 2020. However, just like anything else, there's going to be obstacles in the way that we don't even know about yet. Some judge somewhere is going to hold this up because some critter is going to be affected or some other kind of thing. What we need to do as a Board of Supervisors is be aware of what's coming down the line for objections and be able to support the dam removal for whatever objection takes place. And so that's what I'm hoping to do on this Board of Supervisors, is try to make sure that those dams are removed in a timely manner.
Okay. Roger, did you have any comment?
Yeah,
there?
I'm going. Excuse me. Excuse me. My position on this is, since it's not in my district, the Yurok tribe has asked for our support, and I do support the removal of the dams. I had some questions about agriculture, and they've been appropriately answered and addressed. But I will say that the prosperity of the Yurok tribe is directly connected to the prosperity of Del Norte County. And if the Yurok tribe, which is in their territory where this river goes through, if they're wanting this to increase their traffic flows and bring the salmon back, why not? Our board should embrace it, and I think we are. I don't know, I was at the event where both Governor Browns, one from Oregon, one from California, were celebrating this event, and I celebrate it too. It's a great day that we can remove these dams as long as it's not going to affect our farmers, many of whom are not certainly not in Del Norte County, but perhaps in Siskiyou County and in southern Oregon where the river emanates. But I think where we have to look at this is what's in the best interests of the people who are directly in this geography, and that is the Yurok tribe. So I support them, and I support the opening up of these dams and let the river flow.
Well, it seems like if the salmon runs are restored and the activity with respect to sport fishing in the Klamath River would give us a huge economic boost that is somewhat lacking over the last probably 10 or 12 years. And for that, I would think that it would be of great benefit to that area down there in particular. I would like to then move on to the last topic that I want to bring up in this particular session. I'd like to invite you both back next month before the election to address any new issues that crop up between now and then. But in the meantime, it has come to a lot of folks' attention in this community that, and it's not just this particular election where it's happened, where we get a lot of outside funding coming into the county from sources that one wouldn't expect it to come from. And I'm hoping that perhaps, Bob, you'll start us off and address that issue.
In our elections in Del Norte County, we have very few instances of outside money coming in. In most supervisor races, it's all local donations. And we're talking about small money, we're talking about less than $100 in a lot of cases, where people just want to see a person elected and they're willing to put their money where their mouth is. That makes for good democracy. People are interested, so interested that they're willing to say, I support you, and here are the dollars that it takes. When you get outside money, when you get thousands of dollars from unions or corporations or special interests, they don't do that for the love. They don't love you that much, but they do love your votes. And they know that if they give you thousands of dollars, you're not going to vote against their interests. And that's what's developed here in Del Norte County with two supervisors or two supervisory candidates for the Board of Supervisors, where one's a supervisor and one's a wannabe. Both of them given huge amounts of money from organizations that are based not even in Humboldt, but all the way down in Oakland. What interest does an entity that's located in Oakland have as an interest in Del Norte County? Well, think about it. If they're a labor union and you don't have union labor in your county, and we really don't have a whole lot of union labor in our county other than the prison, what is their interest? Their interest basically will be, and they tried to do this with the school board, their interest will be that any project that has authorization by the Board of Supervisors is going to have to hire union labor. Even if that union labor and the Union Labor Hall is not even located in Del Norte County, which probably wouldn't be because there's not much labor. So where you have that Union Hall located? A lot of times those main union labor halls are located in Santa Rosa. So if you're going to get a carpenter and you have to hire them out of the Union Hall in Santa Rosa, and you have to pay all of those transportation costs, and all of those meals, and all of those hotel rooms, that's a labor cost that's on top of what you would ordinarily spend for a union labor right here in our county. But that's the kind of thing that they're going to be mandating on this Board of Supervisors if they have the chance, because it's their money. And what are those supervisors going to say? Those supervisors are not going to say, we're doing this because of the campaign contribution. They're going to be doing it, they'll say, because it's the right thing to do.
4-1.
4-1. That's the kind of situation
Well,
we
we
face
hope not.
here. It's the kind of situation we face here in Del Norte County that we shouldn't have to face.
I mean, we've had a lot of big projects here in this county over the last probably 25 years, the transfer station, the harbor. Now we've got ourselves involved with the new terminal out at the airport. I know for a fact, being involved with the reconstruction of the harbor, that there was a tremendous amount of union labor that came from out of the county because they, had verbal conversations with a lot of these folks that were here. And the amount of money that they were being paid to come here and do the work dwarfed anything that was even reasonable in terms of compensation.
Well, I'm hoping that I'm going to have a pledge, and I'm going to pledge that I will not accept any money from any organization that's outside of our county, or that's based outside of our county. And I'm hoping that all of the other candidates would sign that kind of a pledge. Let's have clean politics right here in Del Norte County.
But beyond, I mean, you're speaking mainly about union contributions to the county, but
Union, also corporations, any kind of special interest groups.
I see a lot of politicians, individual politicians, donating to particular campaigns, and I'm wondering what that's all about.
And that's another thing, too. When you have a state politician or maybe an assemblyman or a senator.
Federal politician.
Right. Well, no, a state, all right. because we don't have any
We have a
federal.
congressman who's also
Yes, but
Congressman.
that taints the process. Anytime you have somebody who has an interest for your board, it taints the process.
Why would say a congressman or a state senator or even a federal senator be interested in donating money to a local politician? Roger, I want to have you.
Okay, I want to address this by saying that I am self-funded. The occasional donation I get from someone is a constituent is very much appreciated. I do not actively go out and seek funds. I am self-funded and will continue to be. My opponent is not. She has absolutely zero monies of her own, who is putting in this campaign. I think the latest 460 I saw on her was 3,500, then another 1,000 came in from a carpenters union in the Bay Area. So she has $4,500 of other people's money outside of Del Norte County. Now, it's disturbing when you see this, who controls her interests. And in answer to your question, who controls that particular person, everything is political. You're a member of this political party, you support me, we support you. That's not what an NPP race is all about. The Board of Supervisors is not Democrat or Republican. It's no political party. And our issues are not Democrat or Republican. They are issues that affect the community. And to make these issues, and I am sorry that our congressman has donated to my opponent to the tune of 1,000, or I think it was 15. Oh no, I think her local party gave her $1,500, and then each of the state senator and state assembly member was $500 each, and I believe the congressman also was $500. But what are your expectations? We're going to line up with you against someone who's talking about cleaning up your community, fixing your hospital, and fixing that hospital, and we want you to win. What does that say to the community? It says the community, you folks are going to lose. So people have to look through this money. I'm not getting any donations from these political figures for obvious reasons. I'm not of their political party. And if I think I would be, they probably not do, because I'm not in concert with what they want. And it is disturbing, Sam, that they can't see the greater good. And I hope that when we are reelected, that we can start anew and have a real working relationship with my state assembly member or my state senator or my congressman. And he will not be adversarial. He'll say, we need to get you the help. We want to be on the same team on any of these issues because they're not political issues. And I will sign your pledge, Bob.
Thank you.
I won't take any money from any outside interest who will have some kind of a voice to say, Supervisor Gitlin, we expect you to vote this way on this issue. That is not going to happen.
But it seems that while local levels are supposed to not be, local elections are not supposed to be politicized to the extent that you find at the national or even at the state level, that has been a process that has occurred in Del Norte County for a number of years now, where I've seen candidates that run for office here at the local level receive donations from out of the area. I mean, not one, but several. And it's something that is disturbing to people that live and want to see this be a local solving locals problems sort of place, not a person at the local level that supposedly represents us that merely is there to support something that occurs outside of this area, some issue. I mean, the example that comes to mind immediately is why the Board of Supervisors would have sent a letter to the governor of the state of California supporting the proposed fuel tax increase. I mean, that for some reason boggles the mind.
May I address that?
Sure, certainly.
Well, It was at our last meeting. It's interesting that none of this has been reported in our local newspaper.
CC Times.
Okay?
Yeah.
But we have a
CC
newspaper in this community who has 3 days a week publishing, a hard copy, and nothing was mentioned about this pernicious transportation bill, which operates under the disguise of we're going to give you X number of $1 million to fix your road. But here's the payback, which the public is not aware of. Your gas taxes in Del Norte County, which is among the highest in the state, will rise 17 cents a gallon more. If you are operating a diesel vehicle, your diesel tax will rise 30 cents a gallon more. You are going to register your 1989 Oldsmobile clunker, you're going to have a $38 charge on that. And if you dare to buy a new car and have it registered in Del Norte County, in the state of California, there's another $165 surcharge on that. Now, if that doesn't drive people to Oregon to buy their gas and diesel, I don't know what will, because many of them do that anyway and buy who knows what else. This is not how to solve this problem. Rural counties, of which Del Norte County is one, cannot afford this kind of thing. Obviously, it passed on a 4-1 vote. And I tried to reason with my colleagues to say, what are you doing? You're hurting the very people that vote for us. Who can afford 17 cents a gallon more? That'll make the difference between Oregon gas and California gas approaching $1 difference. 85 cents to $1 more. Once this new tax kicks in, diesel will be more. What part of that are they not understanding? Well, we need our roads fixed.
Yeah, let me jump in on that. Let me jump in on the needing the roads fixed. I thought that was a great argument. Think about this. On Highway 101, who uses Highway 101? People going from San Francisco, San Diego, all the way up to Washington, right? That road is used by hundreds of thousands of people. Very little of that used by locals, yet. Who's going to pay for this? It's going to be locals. And where are they going to allocate the money? Remember, all these millions of dollars are going to be allocated on the basis of population in your county. So we get very little money that we have to use to repair all of these roads that we have.
How are fuel costs rising going to affect the cost of everyday living here in the county with respect to the delivery of food, the delivery of pharmaceuticals, the cost of heating in the county, the cost of supplying your water? What's going to happen there?
Think of all the people that are on fixed income. And remember those people in the outlying areas that are paying that $115 a year tax that's taxing for fire protection when they already have their own fire departments? That's unconscionable. That's a tax that nobody ever voted on, and yet only rural people pay it. That's huge. But think of it. Your sewage cost is going to go up, right? That's mandated to go up, all right? As with everything else. And those people that are on fixed income, it's going to come down to real hurt. In fact, it is for a lot of people. Mr. Gitlin and I have advocated before that we need to expand the Meals on Wheels program for needy seniors, because sometimes that's the only meal they get. Falls on deaf ears. All right. Board of Supervisors won't even consider it. Some of the things that go on in this county would surprise you because they're so unconscionable. Let
me address what my solution would be to mitigate this terrible SBX-1 and XBX-57. One's an assembly bill, and they're going to merge them together, and the governor will sign it, I predict. But what's my solution? Because whenever you make a criticism, well, this will do this and raise 17 cents a gallon and here in this gas and 30 cents a gallon and $38 more to register your clunker and $165. What's your solution, Gitlin? Well, it's a simple one. The K through 16 education in the state of California on the pie chart represents almost 39% of our total budget. The Health and Human Services is a little in excess of 30%. Between those two departments alone, I'm not going to sit here and tell you there's a lot of squandering of money, but I am going to tell you they can review and cut that down and raise the percentage of transportation costs, which has currently been lowered from 10 down to 6 in 1 year, and bring it back up to 10%, and you wouldn't have this money if the other two departments contracted and found the money necessary to fund this particular transportation bill. But you don't have that mindset that goes on in the K through 16, is K through 12, and then the community colleges and state universities and University of California system, and then the Department of Health and Human Services, which represents very possibly almost 7 out of every 10 tax dollars on the pie chart. They've got the ability to contract their budgets, not add an additional tax on a very poor community. Del Norte County is one of many rural counties who simply cannot afford this. Yet, our board votes to send a letter to Sacramento. It's unconscionable.
You mentioned, Bob, the $130 or $150 for some. We get a slight break because we have a fire station in our area. But you mentioned the fire tax, which we're in our fifth year. How can the Board of Supervisors effectively steer that unconscionable theft of money from rural communities? How can they do anything about that? I mean, right now it's in court. I don't see it moving at any faster pace than a tortoise. But
first of all, what they need to do is get a consensus on the board saying, this is a bad idea, it duplicates fire service that we already have, and therefore it doesn't benefit anybody except the state, as increasing money in their coffers. Remember, this was when the state was saying they were broke, and this is how they decided to balance their budget. But once the supervisors come up with a letter, they direct their representatives to the rural counties organizations, which they are members. 38 counties belong to this. And they say, we want you to promote legislation that will reverse this. Because right now, sure, it's in court, and we don't know how long it's going to be in court. So let's develop a piece of legislation that reverses that. It's simple as that. Let's get the process going legislatively.
Something at the state level.
Sure, we already have the process going in the courts, but let's do it as a two-pronged item here, all right? Being able to get a friendly legislator, and certainly we have two of those, right? Mr. Wood, Mr. McGuire, who are supposed to represent rural areas, that's us, all right, to reverse that fire tax. Let's get the legislation in there. Let's see who supports us and who doesn't. And if you can't reverse it, and you want to be able to fix your roads, let's encumber everybody. That's cities, counties, everybody, and say a portion of that, most of it, should go to fix the roads. Duh! We don't have to now increase the gas tax, because we have already a method to be able to solve that problem and solve the fire tax problem. If they're insistent upon doing the fire tax before it gets reversed by the courts, then that's a solution for both items.
How are you going to address the issue, though, that when it comes to the state and when they allocate money, it seems like the vast majority of it is expended in heavily densely populated areas, and very often the scraps that we get here in Del Norte County aren't enough to address issues.
You know what I was told by a legislator? Said Del Norte counties, what they spend, all right, as far as the state budget, we are a rounding error on the state budget. All right. They can't even account for us because we're so small, all right, on what they do. But we as a county do have an influence, because there's only 58 counties in California. That's all. And that means we do have an influence, even though we're one of 58, because there are 38 rural counties. And we do have some push there. But when it comes to the rural county organizations that we are a part of, they never deal with our real problems in rural areas. They don't initiate legislation, or they don't initiate legislation that can be passed at the state level. They don't do anything.
Sam, you mentioned something before about we have no representation in the state. Obviously, you know that's what's been driving the Jefferson State movement. But when I was asked about this, I'm looking to solve the problem another way. First of all, I'm a Californian. I'd like to see maybe Northern California, get its fair share of revenues and fair share of representation, I should say. And this can be accomplished. It was changed. The law was changed in 1965. As you know, you have an 80-member assembly and a 40-member Senate. In 1965, due to a civil rights case in Alabama, apportionment was not done as they do in the United States Senate. In other words, whether you're Vermont or whether you're New York, you get 2 senators. Whether it's California or whether it is Wyoming, you get 2 senators. Not so in the state of California. They changed the apportionment. Instead of every county having 1 state senator, which would be 58, and I think they had that moderated where some counties, really low population, would be, like say Trinity and Siskiyou, or Trinity and Del Norte would be part of 1 county. We would have representation in one of the houses in state government, the state Senate, where you would have representation on a basis of geography, not just the assembly, which is total population determined. In the state of California, there are 80 members of the assembly. 23 of them reside in Los Angeles County. In the Senate, there are 40 members of the state Senate. 11 of them reside in 1 county, Los Angeles County. Now, that's not fair. What does that give us? That gives us possibly two state representatives, one for the coastal side and the other for the Redding side, and they're basically looking at their populations in Redding and Sonoma, respectively. And then you've got 2 state senators, which reflect the same thing. So we only have, for the 1/3 northern part, many of those counties Bob mentioned, the 38 counties, you only have perhaps 2 assembly members and 2 state senators.
Senator Nielsen represents 12 counties. 12.
Yeah,
But much of that is in Napa, and he gets down into the more populated northern Bay areas, whereas the
again, we don't count.
But Modoc County and Siskiyou County and Trinity County and Del Norte County and all of these, Lassen County, these rural counties, Glenn County, that are scattered across the northern 1/3 geography, we don't have any representation. And that's really the issue which drives the Jefferson State movement.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've lived in this county for, like I say, 40 years, and initially I was unaware of whether or not we had any representation up here whatsoever. But the longer I live here, the less evidence I have to suggest that we have any kind of effect on the state government whatsoever, let alone the national government. And this program that I've attempted to generate here is designed to identify local problems, that is, within Del Norte County, and bring it to people's attention in this county, particularly the leadership, and make an effort to generate possible solutions for those problems, put people in leadership that can generate their own solutions for those problems, and move this county forward instead of, when I was in college, I used to travel over to the Oregon coast, and I saw all these little Oregon communities dying on the vine because literally their economy evaporated once the natural resource economy was ended. And I saw basically the same thing happen here in Del Norte County, where mining, logging, fishing, farming have all literally shrunk upon themselves or are non-existent, to the point where one would think that at some point somebody would, at the leadership level, figure that out and take some positive steps towards moving this county back into a state of being in the black when it comes to the economy. Instead, what I see is a population that is largely on the poverty side of the scale, and even many of the seniors that come with the intent of retiring in this area find themselves in that state. So, I'm encouraged when I hear Board of Supervisors or prospective Board of Supervisors members talk about making some change, because pretty clearly for the last 20 to 25 years, there has been no positive movement. And in all honesty, it appears to be somewhat negative. I mean, I can remember when the public schools at least provided an average statewide education to the students. The most recent assessment has been below state average here at the local level. So what does that tell me? We're going the wrong way. And so we've gone a bit long today. I really appreciate the fact that the supervisor for District 1 has given up this time to
My pleasure.
put some thought into this, and I really appreciate the fact that Mr. Berkowitz, a prospective member of the Board of Supervisors, has given time to address some of the issues that we find that are not getting solved currently. And I have some glimmer of hope that maybe we can make some changes in the near future and move forward in this county. So with that being said, this has been Conversations with Sam. My guests have been Roger Gitlin and Bob Berkowitz. I hope you've enjoyed this show. And with that, I extend an invitation to both these two gentlemen to repeat and reprise in another month or so prior to the election. And I hope that this weather's treating you kindly, and the beautiful county of Del Norte is also treating you kindly. With that, we're going to go back to music. This is KFUG FM 101.1 on your radio dial, and I hope you have a pleasant day.